tense hush blanketed the federal building in downtown Chicago, where the gray November sky loomed like an omen. The courtroom hallway, usually humming with pre-trial chatter and the clatter of shoes on marble, had gone eerily still. The sound of purposeful heels clicked across the polished floor as Naomi Ellison, a black woman in her early 40s, stepped into the frame. She wore a deep navy pantsuit that framed her like armor. Every thread, every crease, every button told the room she was ready. But readiness didn't matter when the system was blind. At the metal detector checkpoint, a uniformed officer leaned forward with a frown. Officer Darren McKinley, tall, pale, and square-jawed, narrowed his eyes like he had something to prove. "ID," he said curtly. Naomi didn't blink. She reached into her coat and pulled out her federal credentials, an FBI badge and an official summons to appear as the key witness in a corruption case that had already rattled the Chicago Police Department. He glanced at it, scoffed. "This," he said, holding it between two fingers like it was contaminated. People in line looked up. Naomi stayed calm. "You can verify it with your supervisor." But McKinley wasn't interested in verification. He was interested in control. Before she could finish her sentence, he reached for her wrist. Hard. Twisted. Her body jerked sideways. Her briefcase, which carried a secure drive containing 6 months of surveillance footage, whistleblower interviews, and internal memos, fell with a thud. It burst open, documents scattering like feathers. Gasps rippled from the hallway as McKinley slammed her against the wall. "You're under arrest for impersonating a federal officer." Naomi didn't scream. She didn't plead. She stared straight ahead as her cheek pressed cold against the tile wall. She had prepared herself for resistance in the courtroom, not at the door. What Officer McKinley didn't know was this. In 7 minutes, the foundation he stood on would crack, and he would be the first to fall through. Back in the holding area, Naomi sat quietly, wrists red and stiff. A rookie cop, Latino, maybe 22, hovered nearby with nervous hands. He offered her water. She didn't take it. "I'm sorry," he whispered. She turned her head slowly. "Don't be sorry," she said. "Be awake." She'd grown up in Newark, in the kind of neighborhood where you didn't ask why sirens came, only how long they stayed. Her mother raised 4 kids on a postal worker's salary. Her father was buried in a war uniform before she turned 10. From 12 years old, Naomi had walked to school with a pocket copy of the Constitution, not because she wanted to be a lawyer, but because she needed to know how to survive. By 21, she was accepted into Quantico. By 29, she was one of the youngest black female agents in her division. And by 41, she was leading an internal task force investigating racial profiling, abuse of power, and false reporting across multiple precincts in the Midwest. Officer McKinley? He was one of 37 named in sealed documents she had compiled. And now, on the day she came to testify, he had unknowingly cuffed the one person who could dismantle his entire world. Outside the holding cell, the footage had already gone viral. A local journalist had caught it all. The aggression, the handcuffing, the disbelief on bystanders' faces as a black woman was slammed against a wall for showing a badge. Social media exploded. She had a badge was trending within the hour. Inside courtroom 3C, a murmur spread. The presiding judge, Honlisa Rourke, demanded to know why the key witness had not arrived. A bailiff whispered something in her ear. Her eyes darkened. 5 minutes later, Naomi Ellison walked into that same courtroom, no longer in cuffs, but with fire in her eyes. She didn't apologize for being late. She didn't need to. When the judge gave her the floor, Naomi didn't open her notes. She didn't reference a single document. She began with this. "Before I speak on the matter of corruption, let me speak on what just happened to me, not as an agent, but as a citizen." The silence that followed was suffocating. I walked into this building with proof of who I am. I was not believed. I was assaulted. I was ridiculed. And why? She paused, her voice sharp now. "Because the truth doesn't fit the profile some people are trained to see." She pointed to the briefcase placed beside the stand, now retrieved, reassembled, untouched. "In this case file, Your Honor, are sworn testimonies, video files, and internal audio logs naming 37 officers, including the man who put me in handcuffs, the man who told me, 'You don't belong here.'" She turned toward McKinley, who now sat in the gallery, pale and stone-faced. "Well, officer," she said, "I do belong here." "And you? You're about to find out what accountability looks like." One by one, she submitted each piece of evidence: body cam footage, edited reports, internal memos, payoffs. Every click of the audio file was like a hammer falling. By the time she finished, no one looked at McKinley. He had become invisible, the kind of invisible that only shame makes possible. The court recessed, but the nation didn't. News networks picked it up within the hour. Civil rights organizations called for McKinley's immediate suspension. By the next morning, he had been placed on administrative leave. A week later, he was charged with obstruction and assault. But Naomi, she didn't do interviews. She didn't smile for the cameras. She went back to work, and when asked by a reporter how she stayed calm, how she didn't lose her temper during the arrest, she said simply, "I've had to stay calm my whole life." The real question is, why is it still required? Eyes followed her. Phones recorded in silence, and even the court reporter hesitated over the keys. When Aaliyah took the stand, her voice cut through the silence like a blade. "For the past 7 months," she began, holding up a USB drive between two fingers, "I have led an undercover investigation into coordinated misconduct within the St. Louis Police Department." She turned to the projector as the courtroom lights dimmed slightly. With a click, the first video began to play. The screen lit up with dashcam footage, distorted audio at first, until the words became unmistakable. "Book him. Doesn't matter if he did anything. He fits the description." The voice was clear, Officer Brent Halverson. Gasps erupted softly across the room. The camera panned to a scared young black man being shoved against a hood, his voice pleading, "I didn't do anything, sir." The mother of that young man sat just behind the gallery, a trembling hand pressed to her mouth. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but she remained silent. She didn't need to speak. The whole courtroom could feel what she felt. Aaliyah's voice didn't waver. "There are 12 more recordings like this one," she continued, "each involving unjustified detentions of black citizens under the age of 30. None resulted in formal charges. All were dismissed quietly." She turned toward the jury box, the light from the screen flickering across her face. "The pattern is deliberate, the intent is systemic, the damage irreparable." Brent Halverson, seated across the courtroom with his defense team, visibly squirmed. His forehead shined with sweat. He leaned toward his lawyer, frantically whispering, his lips trembling with words he could no longer control. His arrogance, once weaponized in his badge, was now melting in real time. Then came the pivotal moment. The prosecutor, a poised woman with gray eyes, turned to Aaliyah. "Miss Monroe, can you identify the officer who attempted to detain and physically restrain you outside this very courtroom 3 weeks ago?" Aaliyah didn't blink. She lifted her chin and pointed across the room. "Yes," she said clearly. "That officer was Brent Halverson." A ripple moved through the room. The judge, a man in his late 60s with thick glasses and a weary gaze, shifted forward. He asked gravely, "To confirm, this is the same officer involved in this morning's detainment incident?" Aaliyah's voice remained steady. "Yes, Your Honor. That's why I request that the remainder of my testimony be submitted under federal privilege. I believe my safety is at risk." The judge nodded solemnly. "Request granted." The atmosphere shifted immediately. The courtroom was no longer a place where Halverson held power. He was now evidence, a name on a file, a voice on a wire, a man unmasked. The following morning, Aaliyah returned to the courthouse. Same black suit, same brown leather briefcase. But she walked differently now. Purpose had shifted to precision. Resolve had turned to finality. Outside, reporters lined the sidewalk. The media presence had doubled, then tripled. Live broadcasts covered the entrance. Children on the street held handmade signs. "We believe her. Justice is coming." Halverson arrived 20 minutes late. His tie was crooked, he chewed gum, pacing nervously behind his legal team like a man walking into a firing squad. Inside, the judge called the court to order. "Ms. Monroe," he said, "you may proceed." Aaliyah stood. "Your Honor, this morning I filed an emergency motion approved by my supervisor at the FBI, requesting the declassification of additional audio and testimony related to Officer Halverson's conduct. She removed a second USB device, this one marked in red tape. It contains 26 minutes of audio recorded by a confidential informant, an officer who worked directly under Halverson, describing how he ordered falsification of reports, intimidation of witnesses, and retaliation against officers who refused to comply. Halverson exploded from his seat. "This is a setup," he yelled. "She's lying. This is fake." The judge banged the gavel. "Officer Halverson, sit down. One more outburst and you'll be removed." Aaliyah didn't flinch. She stepped closer to the screen and pressed play. A new voice came through, quieter, male, younger. "He told us if a black kid gives you attitude, just book him. Doesn't matter for what. Make it stick. Say you smelled something. Say he reached." The jury looked horrified. One member visibly covered her mouth. Another turned his eyes away. Then came Halverson's voice again, clear, recorded at 2:13 p.m. a.m. in a parking garage. "I don't care what the report says. Make it disappear. I'm untouchable. You understand me? I've got the whole system in my pocket." Silence. Aaliyah paused the tape. "Officer Halverson," she said, locking eyes with him, "is that your voice?" He didn't respond. "Would you like to explain what you meant by untouchable? Or who you meant when you said the whole system?" No response, just a face drained of color. The judge allowed her to continue. Aaliyah turned on a final video clip. The projector showed Halverson meeting someone in a dark parking lot, exchanging a manila folder. Its contents later revealed to be redacted statements, altered post-arrest. His face was clearly visible, frozen on the screen. Gasps. A beat of silence, then the click of the judge's pen. Aaliyah closed her file. "I came here to testify," she said, "but I also came to remind this court that justice doesn't wear a uniform. It demands accountability." She returned to her seat. Halverson remained frozen. The courtroom, once filled with doubt, now trembled with the weight of truth, and Aaliyah Monroe, standing tall beneath the heavy gaze of history, had just changed the course of it. Now it's your turn. Share in the comments what you would have done in her place. What does this story mean to you? But don't stop there, because this isn't the end. After the trial, national news anchors debated for days. How did it take a federal agent in handcuffs to finally break this case open? But Aaliyah knew the answer. It wasn't about timing, it was about truth, and whether people were finally ready to face it. The day after Halverson's arrest, she flew to Washington, D.C., not for celebration, but for briefing. She sat across from a panel of Department of Justice officials, presenting a 43-page report, name lines, timelines, digital evidence, all now admissible. There were gasps when she mentioned the 5-year-old case of Officer Jamal Price, ruled a suicide. The coroner's signature had been forged. The gun residue pattern didn't match. The last text he sent? Deleted from the public file. Aaliyah didn't flinch when she said it. He was silenced because he knew too much. By the end of that week, the DOJ launched a new task force. Natalie Brooks, Aaliyah's tireless attorney and closest confidant, was appointed as legal counsel to the new oversight committee. And Daniel Ruiz, the young officer whose guilt had once eaten him alive, was named the task force's liaison to local law enforcement. Together, they built something bigger than a case. They built a blueprint. In Missouri, reforms rolled out like thunder. Body cam policies rewritten, use of force training overhauled, early warning systems for abusive officers implemented. But that wasn't enough. Aaliyah pushed for national accountability. Whistleblower protection laws were amended to shield those in uniform who chose truth over silence. Halverson was sentenced to 17 years. But his fall wasn't the headline. The headline was what came after. In one viral video, Ruiz addressed a graduating police class. "Your badge is only as strong as your conscience," he said. "And if you're not willing to stand up to the bad guys in your own ranks, you're not protecting anyone. You're just protecting power." That speech reached over 8 million views in a week. Still, Aaliyah remained quiet. She never gave speeches, never stood behind podiums. She returned to Birmingham for a weekend in spring, worn down but not broken. Sitting on the porch of her mother's weather-beaten home, she stared out at the hideout hydrangeas blooming along the fence. Her mother brought her tea and sat beside her. "I watched the whole trial," she said softly. "I kept thinking, that's my daughter. And you stood there like your father would have." Aaliyah smiled faintly. "He never got the chance to do what I did." Her mother squeezed her hand. "But you did, for both of you." In the corner of the living room sat a dusty old photo, her father in uniform, smiling, unaware of the storm his daughter would one day walk into alone. Later that night, Aaliyah opened her laptop. An email had arrived from a young black girl in Detroit, 17 years old, applying to the FBI internship program. It read, "I didn't think people like me could do what you did, until I saw you do it." Aaliyah read it 3 times before responding. All she wrote was, "Yes, you can, and you will. I've got your back." She closed her laptop and looked up at the ceiling. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like the walls were closing in. She felt them holding her up. This story, like many others, won't make it into history books. It won't be read in classrooms or etched onto bronze plaques. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe justice isn't a moment. Maybe it's a chain, every link, a person who decides to do the right thing, even when it's dangerous, even when it costs everything. Aaliyah never wanted to be a hero. She wanted to be believed. And in the end, she wasn't just heard, she was remembered. So now it really is your turn. When the system doubts you, will you keep standing? When someone else is silenced, will you speak up? When the world tells you that power wins, will you remind them that truth fights back? Let Aaliyah's story live not just in memory, but in momentum. If it moved you, let it move others. Share it, speak it, carry it. Because the next time injustice knocks, maybe the person answering will be you. Subscribe for more real stories where justice rises, not with noise, but with quiet courage.